So one of the things that NSPN really works on is recognizing that we are policymakers at a variety of levels. So local, state, federal, and there's a variety of ways to interact. So just in a general area, I'd like to see sort of, and it's you guys are coming in quickly, so that's great. Detroit, Boston, Atlanta, DC. Part of what we want to engage with you on is meeting you at the area that you're desiring to engage with. So one of those things is at the local level. It's an opportunity to make a big difference in a way that is impactful to your community on a very small level. Oops, I'm going to mute someone. If you guys can mute yourselves, that'd be great. So I am going to actually ask Elena, that just wrote last, to talk about the State Water Resources and Control Board for two reasons. One, let's talk about water a little bit. Water is one of those things on each state that is very important across our nation. California has some of the most intricate, complex, interesting water distributions and water rights, but it also has an applicability to agriculture and technology with water sensoring, water monitoring. And so while I think that a lot of our organizations do talk about mental health and health care as a common, reproductive rights as common issues, water, agriculture, wildfire is starting to become more prevalent, especially on our coasts. Hurricane is touching in Florida and affecting people. If Elena, you could come on and I could ask you a couple of questions about your experiences, that would be great. Thank you for jumping in and in this flexible time that we have. Can you describe for our audience sort of what your job is in the water realm? I think it's sort I don't know how many people know about your job, and it is something that is so important, particularly in California. And if you could introduce yourself just a little bit, thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. I'm Elena. Um, so I will preface this by saying that I literally started my job like last week. So I'm very, very new to this area, but um, I just finished up as a Sea Grant Fellow. So I spent about 8 months in this office. It's the Office of Information Management and Analysis. So we do a lot of thinking about data science and how to do good like QA, QC with the data, as well as science communication and visualization and getting all of that out to folks. So a couple examples of projects I've worked on have been a safe to swim map where we're looking at like E. coli data in the water all around California and taking that and kind of funneling it all into a script so that it's available as an interactive map online. So we create a lot of public products like that with water quality data. We also do some monitoring. So the unit I'm in is a SWAMP, Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program. So we look at things like the accumulation of mercury in fish, and we reach out to tribes and local community-based organizations to chat with them about what fish they're fishing and using for subsistence. So they're eating a lot of that fish that may have contaminants or toxins built up in it. So yeah, there's like a bunch of different things that we work on, but my position is really at the intersection of, like I said in the chat, science communication, data science, and policy, because we're at the water boards, and the rest of the water boards does all of the regulatory work, so we don't really do a whole lot of that. But yeah, if you have questions, I can try to answer them.
That's great. Thank you. And can you explain how you work with other agencies or constituents in your area or in California? How do you keep it local? How do you make sure that things are being done
Yeah.
in the community and equitable?
Yeah. So, I mean, working with tribes is a huge way of how we're doing that. The program I was mentioning with the mercury and other bioaccumulation in fish, specifically has devoted 30% of its budget to doing equity related work. So, a lot of that is reaching out to tribes, kind of one region at a time. So, this year we're doing um, the first of 3 years in the San Francisco region, Region 2. And we're having all of these workshops. There's another one today, actually. They're having workshops with folks asking them, like, which contaminants do you want us to focus on? And which areas do you want us to focus on for all of our sampling? And then we take that and we go and we work with partners like CDFW, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and contract out for them to go and physically collect those fish. And then we do more contracting out with different labs that will process the data. So it's a lot of interacting with, in particular, local tribes, community-based organizations. We work with OEHA, who then I think someone mentioned they work for OEHA in the chat. So maybe you can hear more from them. But they're the folks who actually make the advisories that are put out at beaches saying, these are the fish that you want to be careful of and maybe not fish too much of. So there's a lot of coordination between the different agencies, the local folks, and then just the public in general about like what's safe for them to eat. Um, and a lot of that also goes into a work group called the Safe to Eat work group, where people come together and kind of talk about developments in the data. Um, and then I will say also like a more relevant one maybe is the FHABs, freshwater harmful algal blooms, is like a big thing right now. And so they're working to try to get a lot more outreach out to folks to let them know that, if their dog goes into waters that has these like cyanobacteria or other blooms, they could die from it. And so there's a lot of like complexity and how you want to communicate that information to the public that I'm just learning, how people are navigating in the agency. Um, yeah, so
Well,
I'll stop
great.
there.
Well, congratulations on your new job. That's
Thank
exciting.
you.
And again, we like to build networks. So those of you guys who are in sort of the water and pollution area, please connect. I'm going to see if Melinda Paduani is available because Melinda is in transit, so can't come. If you maybe could come, if you can't at all even come verbally, interesting because she's on the Florida side, so coast and coast. And I'm kind of wondering if there's a big difference in agencies and local aspects to water policy. But we can think about that later. Maybe Lily Wu is oops. Pankaj, you are sharing your screen. Okay, turned that off. Lily, you are in Oahu. Is that the way that you say that?
It's
Um,
actually, as Elena said it, OEHA. It's the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. It's another agency under the umbrella that is the California Environmental Protection Agency. And it's actually 6 sports departments and an office that work on different environmental media. So air, water, and soil. And we're supposed to work together to help regulate the environment for public health. I work at the intersection of public health and the environment. So I have worked with her office before, as she mentioned, Office of Information Management, something analysis, OEMA, as I know it. And yeah, so the agencies are connected mainly through, I think, OEHA, because we do work with the other boards and departments and we're the office. But it's challenging because all the media, air, water, and soil are separately regulated and they all affect our health. And so communities that I know it, and I think everybody knows it, all has air, water, and soil. So that's the intersections.
Could you help our audience is a lot of young adults that are interested sort of at the early career stage of getting their job and may have an interest, started out in water sensors and amounts of water and how much plant and biological matter needs water, but are interested more in that community participatory engagement. Can you give any tips or tricks on how to get more involved using their science background, whatever it is, whether it's, air pollution or soil contaminants, into getting a good job at the state? Either of you or anyone else that's working in a state level, how do you get a job?
I think that's a very interesting question. I have 17 plus years myself, so I am still even very much learning. It's an interesting space because I think in more recent years, especially as California, where I'm also from, is addressing equity work and environmental justice and equity, and all of those intersect in a very big way. I think especially under our current administration, with environmental justice being uplifted by the Biden-Harris administration, and also California having similar state level policies to address equity. That's definitely been a way to bridge some of the technical work with the policy work. So I admit I only learned about NSPN in the last year plus, and I went to the last annual meeting in April in Riverside, and that was very interesting to me. So I was just like, wow, local bridging and state level and federal level, they all do intersect, but to the extent that I actually have been trained as a physiologist and a scientist very much through and through. I didn't have policy classes, and I wish I did back when I was a student. That's not to say you can't learn it and pick it up, but at the same time, I think that networking is incredibly important, as you said. And then also just like, no one person, no one group can know everything. So it really is helpful to learn the different connections that people can build and the coalition building that you said, because I think that is definitely where work gets done better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to see if Lisa Todd is available to jump on, because you're in Detroit and Flint, Michigan. One, a little bit of water, at least, publicly water connection, but also you're working in public health and mental health. And I'm wondering, one, Michigan is a state sort of, we talk, these two are in California, and there are some people on the East Coast as well, but sort of, you have the Great Lakes, you have public health, mental health. There's definitely disparities of health in Michigan that you could speak to. Are you available to come online and kind of tell us your career and your path and sort of what you do on the local level in public health? I know I'm putting on people on the spot, and it's like, oh, are people even, there's kind of like
Hi,
checking
yeah, this
out.
is Lisa Todd here.
Great. Hi, Lisa. Could you
Sorry,
tell us your
I am here to learn, but unfortunately, I don't know that I have as much to contribute as others. I am studying public health policy right now in a PhD program, and I have a JD, and I focused on public health law and a master's degree in clinical psychology. So some of these things I think really feed well into the topics that are being discussed. But because I've been a professional student for a long time, I just haven't dipped into the professional world as deeply as I'd like to. But I think that there's certainly,
can you tell a little bit about Michigan? Did you grow up in Michigan, or have you been there for 5 years or so?
I've been there throughout my graduate school career, so since 2002.
Can you tell us a little bit about the local stuff? How do you know when you're studying your topics, if it's important?
Well, I think that, one of the important things is community feedback and really soliciting community engagement to get that information. I think, one of the things that I've learned and recently learned through community engagement is that Detroit and Flint are cities that look similar on the surface, but they are not. The citizens have different interests. They have different trust levels. They have, different forms of engagement. And I think that, one of the important things that I've learned that I think would generalize to other cities, not just in Michigan, but elsewhere, is that, it's really important to know your audience and to really get a feel for who the leaders are, what their interests are, how much they trust that they put into, policy developers, researchers, and other potential partners, because those things matter and they matter a lot. So I'd say that's a big takeaway message for me. And certainly Detroit and Flint have both, had their trust broken a number of times. And so that's, something that is one of the first challenges to overcome and to continue overcoming and not imagine that it's been solved at any point in time.
Yeah, that is one of the things that we talk about at NSPN a lot is sort of as you are getting trained, you're learning how to do the tasks that you need to do, the writing analyses, the support letters, the testimony, the oral communication, the coalition building, the reaching out to community. And someone is okay. When the training isn't enough, right? And so training is just one step. And then how do you become trusted? And that those two things together help you become sought after, right? And so what does it look like to build trust? And is it an active aspect? I believe there are aspects that you can train to become more trustworthy. And we're going to explore a little bit of that later in the week as well, when we particularly talk about coalition building and what that means to build trust among similar groups, different groups, individuals that you've never met before. So that's a very good reflection to consider too.
Sure. Thank you. Happy to help out.
Thank you. There is someone, Matt Mattia from Little Rock, Arkansas. And so we haven't heard from someone from the South. Matt, are you available to pop in and just tell us about your area and sort of what you're working on and studying, or you're employed? I don't know if you're studying or employed. Or Hannah Stewart from Houston, Texas.
Sure. Hi, good morning,
Okay.
everyone. Yes, I'm currently an educator, teaching. I moved from 9 to 12 to the middle grades. And I'm also involved with lots of different research, data analysis. I got um, a recent publication with ASE on data analytics. My interest with science policy is I think with my teaching experience for over the years, it feels like it's about time to be involved in that particular area. So that's why I like for me this is like my first time delving into this particular type of organization. So I'm kind of a newbie, so to speak, and I'm really interested with everybody sharing this moment.
Right. Do you know, education is actually, sometimes we talk about science policy, and oftentimes when I'm talking about science policy, I'm talking about more generally is policy done by STEM individuals, right? So science, technology, engineer, math, medicine, agriculture, right? And it's a way of thinking, and it's a way of using our science methods, evidence-based approaches to tackle science problems. So education is sort of the foundation of our development. And so I don't know if you've ever taught outside of Texas, but as you're teaching your students, do you think that there is an opportunity for Texas or your area of Texas to get more involved in the education and sort of the hands-on experiences and the funding of education, particularly STEM education in Houston? Do you have any hot takes on that? That's to you, Matt. Or anyone that's an educator.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. All right. Yes, so in Arkansas, I think I got an email from one of the representatives from uh this organization, and it was about a representation with the Science Policy Network in the state. I think as an educator, I got a firsthand experience and you know um lived realities when it comes to STEM policies from teaching um in Title I schools from the urban areas of Florida all the way to the central rural part of Arkansas. And over the years, I've known that there is such a big need for particular um initiatives that needs to be put on into certain programs that is likewise an elephant in the room. But again, it's like the students are the ones that are suffering when these particular needs are not met, and instead just passed on to teachers being the frontliners. There is a disconnect between uh, the teacher and sometimes it's within the district itself and with the the state agencies, or I could say the local government. But again, I think with us, our role would be to initiate those meaningful conversations that how we could actually do something better in terms of making sure that we have um, equitable equitable resources, infrastructure that would benefit uh, the people or the community.
Mhm. So I want to transition. Thank you, Matt. I agree with that. I was an educator, so I started out. I graduated from college, and I moved back home, and I was a teacher for 4 years. 3 of those years, 1 year subbing, 2 years in a private school, full time, mostly full time, and then 1 year in a charter school in LA area. And I learned a little bit more about the systems of education that we had. And then as I moved up in my career, I went back to grad school and got my PhD in neuroscience. And I stayed in that sort of, graduate school level at that time, and saw the differences in community college systems. And I've actually been to Delta College in Michigan, and outside of Detroit, and really kind of gotten a deeper dive on our systems of education. And it's very interesting. And so that leads me to the next topic that I want to touch upon is, how do you get involved when you have a real job? So you're a teacher, you're a professor, you're working at a department agency, you're working at a for-profit organization. Like one of our board members is John Deere, one of our founders is at John Deere. I was at trade associations doing government relations work, things like that. How do you still kind of get local and stay local? And so unfortunately, the commissioner, O'Shea, won't be able to join us today. But I do want to talk about that sort of system. So if you go to your state, your favorite state or the state that you're in, there are commissions. And so what is that? A commission is a group of people that are organized, sometimes appointed, most often selected, to really focus on an area such as, K through 12 education. I was on, we also heard it called a working group, right? I think Elena is going to a working group a little bit later on something specific to her topic. And so working groups and commissions and state boards, they're all working on something hyper specific, and typically hyper local. And so the commissions really look at the aspects of fish and wildlife, or like Lily said, like water, soil, and air, right? And then you right now can look on your state or a state's boards, and you can look up, California boards and commissions. You'll see this long list of boards and commissions. There's oftentimes an organization, this might be something that NSPN grows to do, that shares how you can select, self-select to raise your hand to be a part of a board and commission. And, from the academic in me, Lisa said that, she's still in education time. So am I. I love learning, and I've taken a look at boards and commissions throughout my career, and it's a really interesting opportunity that you can take, particularly as you're just out of your graduate program, you have some expertise. You don't always get selected for the commission that is in your background, but your background of science education is really important. So I encourage you as a first step, kind of explore the boards and commissions in your state, the boards and commissions in your area. And it's an interesting way to participate in the public process at a very local level. Or statewide level, but gets you more instruction on things that are happening in your state. And like I said, there are like 300 boards and commissions in California, from thinking about reentry and recidivism, thinking about energy controls, thinking about fire protection, and things like that. So it's a really interesting development for you guys to engage with. And then commissions oftentimes write reports so that those actually can be more influential to the state legislators, to the city councils, to the board of supervisors. And so your work oftentimes is more directly applied to the departments that it was requested from. And so it's a really interesting way to engage in it. I haven't been a commissioner and I haven't been on a board, but I've definitely interacted in my past with boards and commissions. And most recently, my work was on transportation policy. Autonomous vehicles. So think if you've seen those Waymo or Zoox autonomous cars driving around that have the big wheel on the top, that's their sonar and LiDAR, and particularly you may have seen them in San Francisco. LA is popping them up just recently. Arizona's been a long time. Florida's been a long time. And Bellevue in the Seattle area, Washington State's had them for a long time. So I was working on expanding. My goal was to expand the pilots in regions so that we have freedom of transportation and mobility longer into our adult life, past the time that we are safely driving. We can still have mobility. So I'm seeing a comment on Angela that you are in the Governor's Science and Technology Policy Fellow in Pennsylvania on environmental protection. If you're available to pop up, I would love to ask you, and you're in your early career time, is sort of how are you building community? How do you seek out the local opportunities that are so important as you're building your career? Because many people on this call are building your career, and it would be great to get some advice on how are you building your network?
Yeah, thank you, Tepring. When I started exploring science policy career, I started with my scientific organizations. Like my scientific organization is American Geophysical Union. They have lots of great science policy programs. And then I have NSPN. This is sort of like a short explanation from my career.
Yeah. And then how do you stay connected? So you're part of NSPN, you're part of your national network. Do you just passively engage, or do you talk to people? Obviously I'm requesting that you participate in this. What would you do to like give tips on how to first engage?
Yeah, I would say definitely actively searching for connections and then asking people that whether I can do an informational interview with you. That's how I started it. And I also created my own chapters in my campus for NSPN.
That's great. So that's great. Thank you so much. So you're building community, and that's what I really encourage you to do, is build your community. So she started a local group at her school. But one of the things that I do want to highlight is informational interviews. So particularly those that are starting out in the science policy realm or starting out, period. Informational interviews are short meetings. Usually I request 15 minutes. Usually I try not to go past 20 minutes, that asks people, what do you do? How do I get into it? Not necessarily, can I get a job from you, but just what do you do? It's so interesting, right? There's so many jobs out there that we've never even heard of or experienced. Just what do you do, and how do you get a foot in the door, and sort of how do you find the community members that are doing something similar? And that's just you're just requesting information. There's this aspect called a 5-minute favor. So do something for them that may help them, that you can guess might help them, whether it's commenting on their paper, kind of highlighting it, sharing it with others, participating in an event that they need volunteers with. But figure out sort of that something you can do in a very short 5 minutes. If they've written a book, write, a great review on it. If they are you know, if you have a connection that you think might be valuable for them, share that person's information and say, I'd love to connect you, things like that. But I really think that if we took the time, if we carved out the time, we made the time once a week to reach out to 3 people that you wanted an informational interview with, right? We're talking about 45 minutes, an hour a week. Then it would change our lives, because building those connections are really so important to not only our individual development and growth, not only for the next phase of our career or life, but it's in those interactions when they're true and meaningful that you can sometimes find things that you never would have anticipated before. So with that sort of encouragement, although we didn't hear directly from the commissioner, I hope you did learn a little bit about commissions and boards and working groups. You did think about what you can do in your own local network. There are departments and agencies that overlap with your career interest. Even if you are staying in industry, staying in the for-profit, in the nonprofit in your industry, there's definitely those aspects. And I'm going to, before we move to open-ended questions and sort of chatting, I wanted to see if David would come on and share your path and give us kind of like the 2-minute version of what you do, because it sounded so interesting. David, are you available to pop online and share a little bit about your job, David Almanza?
Okay, hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I happen to be at a coffee shop with a lot of background noise, so that's why I hadn't popped on.
No, you're perfect.
So I am David Almanza. I am a postdoctoral researcher at the Desert Research Institute. I'm part of the Southern Nevada Heat Resilience Lab. So we do a lot of work around climate, and specifically climate adaptation. My PhD is in public affairs, like public policy. And so I really work at that nexus of literally science, research, and policy. So there are days that we're trying to bridge that gap between scientists and legislators. And a lot of it is just essentially connecting the gaps that we have around heat mitigation. Sometimes it involves emergency management. Sometimes it involves just like leading research projects, or just trying to, again, set the agenda for climate adaptation and policy development around issues of science. So that's the gist.
So I'm going to put you in the hot seat a little bit longer. What are some translatable skills? So you got your degree and now you have a job. What are some things that like all scientists, all people that are getting their education that you really use that we may not have appreciated?
The first thing that comes to mind, and this might not be the most sophisticated answer, is actually just management of like information. So even when it came to like writing lit reviews and being able to condense large amounts of information into sort of like, here are the bullet points of what I want this lit review to be about that will prepare the reader for my analysis. That skill, I use that for writing briefs for policy makers, for literally just being able to condense information. Because when we're doing research, we're talking to scientists and trying to translate that to what's relevant to the public. We're always condensing. Sometimes I have to prepare like a media brief, and it's like, okay, we have so much information. You only get about a minute with the media, and they're only gonna print a version of that. So it's always synthesizing, which I'm trying to do my best of that even here. So that would be a skill. It's just always being able to synthesize information, which I think graphs code prepares you for when you're thrown like a million articles your way, and you just have to be able to pick out those, what my professors would call golden nuggets of information. I think that's really important.
And that was a golden nugget. And that's why I do informational levels, even at my level, even as executive director in NSPN, because I get golden nuggets on that. And what a beautiful way to end our day today before we open it up to questions. And thank you all for joining sort of the impromptu way that we did it with the commissioner's absence. So with that, I would like it to open it up for questions. And we have some great experts in the room as well, and some people that are experienced chapter leaders thinking about local at their own organizations. I see Stefano on the call, Angela's on the call, Caitlin's on the call, Cassandra's on the call. All of you guys I know are leaders in your own school as you're advancing and more. So if you would come off of mute, and this is a time in our last about 10 minutes, 15 minutes to ask questions that may be pressing for you. I know you sort of didn't know what to expect coming to this. So I do thank you for your time as well. Society for Neuroscience is my home organization, my major one. So I see that some people are at the SFN meeting in Chicago right now. So thank you for joining us even for this short period of time. And I see Rachel's hand.
Hi guys, I put this in the chat as well, but I've been actually a part of NSPN since 2019-ish time. I've been kind of on and off with this because I decided that science policy isn't my main career path. I really want to do something kind of science outreach and stuff, but I'd still like it to be somewhat part of my life. But for better or for worse, I'm getting my PhD, I'm almost done, in frog behavior in the tropics. So getting that to connect to science policy stuff that really kind of matters in the United States at the community level is a bit of a confusing kind of muddling thing. And so if anybody has any tips as to volunteering opportunities or ways to market myself to get onto things like commissions and such that I can do along with my day job so that I can be part of policy stuff. I am really good at learning on the fly, hands-on and stuff, but like getting your foot in the door is obviously very important. And how to navigate something like that, I am curious as to people's ideas.
Mm-hmm. First and foremost, that's kind of a really cool studying. Hopefully you've gotten to do some field work in the tropics.
I got to spend a year in Panama and a few months in Costa Rica. So there's been definitely perks, but yes, it's been a project that more lends itself to, if you want to stay in academia, that's a cool project to have done and to continue, but I don't. So it's, how do I use what I've learned and move forward into other avenues?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you specific name. His name is Tyrone Hayes. He's out of UC Berkeley, I believe, Bay Area, if not. An amazing, if you look up Tyrone Hayes frogs, you will find him. So that's for you particularly. But the way that I would go about that, if you are having a similar question on like, okay, I did a deep dive on the topic of my choice for my dissertation. I graduated with it, master's thesis, PhD, but now I want to broaden. How do you broaden, right? And so one of the things that I did was I looked for nonprofits that matched roughly the things that I was interested in, and I volunteered my time. That gives you sort of the touch point that might transition you to a full-time career in that. So all I did was learn about the organization, learn about that uh, issue area, and volunteered to write a grant. But as you know, grants have that purpose, the impact, and what you're doing. And so through that exercise of, and we were really trying to get that grant, it made me focus on a new topic. So I think trying to do that. The second thing is Googling, famous science policy famous people like a Tyrone Hayes. So what you would do is put your topic in there, public policy expert, right? Or influencer. I don't feel like that's a good key term, influencer, for the senior level group, but a younger generation may be calling people influencers. Like, I don't know what we would call Tyrone Hayes right now, but you're trying to look for the foremost expert. Maybe that's the right term. So your topic, mine is neurobiology of language, foremost expert in planum temporale, and stuttering, influencer, guru, blogs, right? And you want to see those people perkle up. And that's how I got into neuroscience. I read a book called Liars, Lovers, and Heroes. I was like, this is phenomenal. What do these authors do? They happen to be neuroscientists. And I was like, I want to be like them when I grow up. I constantly read books like that. And I'm constantly finding that people that are inspiring me. So I encourage you to, one, get involved and activated locally in a nonprofit of your choice. And then two, find the superstar for you to aspire to be like, and find out about their career path and do some informational interviews. Thank you for your question, Rachel. That was really good. And stay connected, and we'll definitely be thinking more about that. And especially if you can come back on Friday, we're going to learn more about how to actually branch out and use our research for local good, local impact.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I did see someone's hand popped up and then popped out. And I missed the name.
That was probably me.
Okay. Do you have something now, Patrick?
Basically, I'm with Science for Georgia, and we're one of those nonprofits.
Okay.
So
tell us more. How can we get involved?
Sure. So we do science communication trainings. A lot of what we do when we're working with scientists is we're teaching them how to communicate with the public. It's one of those lessons that you don't always get when you're doing your PhD, when you're working in a lab. You get a lot of communication training on getting all of your information out there, but not necessarily how the public will be actually able to interact with that information. So working with nonprofits, there's always groups that are going to need help, need support. And so like reaching out to your community members, finding out what's going on in the area, even going and looking at talking to like your local commissioners, seeing what the issues are. Like we do a lot of environmental justice work here in Atlanta and other areas around Georgia. And we're going out to communities and having listening sessions and finding out what they're focusing on. And then reaching out to experts and bringing them in to help us work with those communities about what's going on. So, and then taking that to the State House and trying to make policy and get those things changed. So there's many entry points, depending on your time, depending on your motivation, I think. So there's it's one of those situations where I think there's always someone out there who could use your expertise. And even just maybe your familiarity with what's the cutting edge of the research you're doing. Like not everyone's going to know about, which bacteria are eating plastics right now, but there might be a company that's working on it that a nonprofit you could use that connection to if you have that connection. So there's so many little things you can do with your expertise. And yeah, there's always something you can do. And like writing grants, most scientists who've gone through academia have a lot of grant writing experience. Nonprofits need that.
Yeah. And I like what you said, that you may not even know the connections you have, right? So you are in an environment and at whatever stage, and you have some knowledge that may be applicable to a different group. So thank you so much of being part of our connections, and hopefully we'll have more people. Do you have to be in Georgia to be participating with you? Can we be remote?
And for us, we would love for like remote works. We focus on the issues that are happening here in Georgia, because we have a lot of like energy burden, water quality issues, air quality issues, things of that sort. But we're also going down to the Capitol and providing the representatives there, like white papers on the laws that they're voting on. So having experts who can help us develop those white papers rather than necessarily having an intern do it is sometimes, useful.
Great.
Like the State House of Georgia is a 3-month, like the session is 3 months and they vote on 2,000 bills. So yeah,
To
no
put
one's
it
an
in
expert.
perspective, California has a 9-month year, 2-year cycles. So it's full time, and they have 3,000 bills. So it's pretty much the same amount of bills in a third of the time.
Yes. And most of Georgia's representatives have day jobs. So we have a very interesting set of things. So we just try to get as much information out there as possible.
And it's called Science for Georgia, right?
Yeah, I'll put a link in the chat.
Great, thank you. So with that, our time is coming to an end. Just some things as you're developing your career on ways to connect. So think about your local topic nonprofits. Think there, Science for Georgia might have some good ideas to connect to get you guys experience. Starts out volunteer, but then your goal is to transition to full-time employment. You can stay at your place of employment, your preferred priority, the full-time job, and do things that are impactful science policy on the side. There are different varying ways that you can get involved, and not all of them are full-time commitments. So think about that. Also, I oftentimes get from early career people, how do you know what jobs are out there? What I suggest is each one of you guys does have a legislature in your state that you prefer to be in. Go to the state, look up a bill of your topic interest or a committee of your topic interest, and they will have letters of support and opposition on a bill that's of your interest. And those organizations are the ones that are active in policy and science. I'll give you a more specific example so that you can go and do it. I worked in California Senate Human Services Committee. And every year at the end of the year, we published a list of all the bills and all the analyses. You click on the little link of I care about foster care youth. There's a bill on foster care youth of how many hours of schooling is necessary. You click on that, and at the bottom of the analysis, it says, Department of Education. It says, Teach for America, Youth Center of America, California Young Adults Organization. And it's all of these organizations that you would never know of, except they do participate in legislative policy crafting. And so then you'd have a body of organizations that are at least somewhat active, and you can look at other bills and get more lists and sort of start looking at that and going down this rabbit hole of like, okay, I've never heard, I'm just going to give one that's popular. I've never heard of Boys and Girls Club. You then go and Google Boys and Girls Club, and you're like, oh, they do exactly what I'm interested in. I studied youth development and mental health, and I really want to see what's going on with them. So that's how you can sort of learn about organizations that you may never have heard about, going to those legislative analyses and finding the organizations that are participating. So I want to thank you so much for your time again. I'm Tapring Pequado, Executive Director of NSPN. Thank you for being part of our community